everyone. Today we have a guest, Tamsin Astor. Welcome, Tamsin. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you, Julio.
So, Tasmin is a professional coach. She does also yoga and she's been engaging in internationally. So, Tasmin, talk to us about that. I mean, if you had to characterize Tasmin to general public, how would you describe yourself?
I think I would describe myself as somebody who very much lives by experience. I experiment. I go out in the world. I try the food. I get on the plane. I go and listen to the music. I have interesting conversations with people. And I've been doing that all my life. And I think that when you go out in the world and you explore and integrate, it gives you great perspectives on how other people live. It gives you great
Sure.
perspectives on mindset and like value structures, and then how you then make decisions and live in the world.
Very nice. Awesome. So tell us a bit about how did this journey started. I mean, was it an idea that you had since child, or it just started afterwards? Tell us a bit about that.
So part of how I became the chief habit scientist was my own personal journey. I was an academic and I loved studying, I loved researching, I loved weaving ideas together, I loved having conversations, I loved being in an academic environment. One of the things I struggled with was I never felt like I had a real impact on people's lives. Like I loved working with students, but I didn't feel like I was having a big enough positive impact.
Sure.
And when I decided to start making some changes, that was one of the things. I wanted to have an impact on people's lives so that I could help them think about how they showed up, how they could create freedom and love are my two kind of biggest values, right? How can we create freedom in our physical bodies, in our minds? How can we have access to education, money, health, wealth, right? And with the lens of love, like I go into the world thinking people are going to treat me well, and that I'm going to treat people well until I'm proved otherwise.
And what was your experiences with people during doing that? Of
So I had some good ones and some bad ones, right? Like that's how we
course.
learn,
Yeah.
right? And I think the biggest is you have to, or you have to. I chose to keep getting back up, right? So I've had some really big personal traumas in my life, which could have created the lens of backward living, right? Rear view living, being like, I'm going to be stuck in the past. Whereas I chose to look at those experiences as, okay, like what did I learn here? Was it something to do with how I showed up? Did I not see something? Was I not listening to my intuition? How can I learn from this and go forward, right? So there's sort of the switch between why is it happening to me to why is it happening for me, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's an interesting point. As I mentioned many times, it's important to understand the other part. Sometimes it's hard because I mean it's just hard. I mean you cannot be liked by everyone. So I mean that's the most complicated. And before you don't know, it's engaging sometimes. But I always say, everything we do in a life journey, it's a life experience. We just take it as a positive impact, as I would say. Do not feel saying that in the future said maybe I should have done that differently. Well, I mean, you cannot control all the environment around you. I mean, not even ourselves. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or in 30 minutes after, and this is the challenge that we just need to face in reality. I mean, you cannot control everything around you, but you can control the current event. So if it didn't go the way you want it to be, just take it as good experience. For then in the future, you don't repeat it. And in the end, it's kind of like that. So you started also personal coaching. Tell us a bit about how do you started this part of the journey, and how do you do it? I mean, how are the conversations or insights? I like to hear it. Yeah.
Sure. So my initial coaching certification was in Ayurvedic health coaching. Ayurveda is the traditional Indian medical system, and one of the reasons I pursued that was I found when my middle child was struggling with cancer that I got really sick with all of those kind of burnout, overwhelm, stress symptoms of insomnia, food allergies, weight loss, weight gain, food reactivity, allergies, and all of the Western doctors kept doing tests and finding nothing wrong with me, but then saying, take a drug. And I was like, this feels like you're trying to suppress a symptom, but not understand the underlying cause here. And I refused to do that. So I started practicing, and because I was in the world of yoga, started practicing a lot of the Ayurvedic concepts around what is my daily rhythm, my daily ritual? Am I going to bed and getting up at the same time every day? Am I sleeping? What are the kind of foods I'm eating? Am I taking care of my mental body, my energy body, And I realized that I was living in a state of reactivity. I was responding to everybody else's needs in my environment first, even my dog before my own, right? Which is part of the trope of motherhood often in this country of you serve everyone before yourself. And so when I started taking charge of my own day, and one of the things that was really important to me was what I call the bookend. I decided I had to start the day on my own terms and end the day on my own terms. Who knew what was going to happen in the middle? Like you said, I didn't know what was going to happen during the middle of my day. And so I got certified in Ayurveda and then became an Ayurvedic health coach. But trying to do that kind of coaching in Ohio when I was living there over a decade ago, it was like 2012, 2011. It was really difficult to introduce this concept of cleansing and energy and sleep and, mind-body relationship.
Yes.
So I quickly realized that I needed to have more Western language. So I then got certified as an executive coach. And for a few years, I ran 2 businesses. I had an executive coaching business with 1 website and jackets and suits. And then I had my health coaching website where I would have my nose ring in and I'd have my tattoos out and I would talk about energy. And then I integrated the 2 in 2016 when I realized that the common theme of all of it was habits.
So we have a comment from William J. Matthias Jr. From LinkedIn. Says, learn, grow, and evolve always. You like to comment on that?
Yes. I mean, what he's referencing is this idea of, we could talk about it in the brain in terms of plasticity, right? That we, I have this ability to change how we show up. Like, I'm a big fan of Bruce Lipton's work, right? We have the blueprint. We have this basic genetic structure that tells us you're more prone to depression, you're more likely to get heart disease, you might have a gene for cancer, you might have a gene that, et cetera, et cetera. How you choose to live will affect the expression of those genes, right? So if you choose to eat healthy foods, if you choose to eat crappy foods, if you choose to exercise, if you choose to meditate, if you choose to spend time with people who have the habits that you want, who have a good outlook, right? You can change that expression. So what he's referring to, I 100% believe, which is we can keep changing who we are and how we show up by doing the work.
Sure, absolutely. So give us an advice. What do you think about, daily routine as human beings, how it should be, according to expertise? And how should everyone have this natural routine every day, and why?
So firstly, one of the things, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs who really recoil at being told what to do, the shoulding. Like, don't tell me what to do. They have a bit of that rebellious nature, right?
Yeah.
So what I always say to people, back to that kind of the way I started, was experimentation. Look and see, this person.
I just wanted to compliment. Sorry about that. Don't miss your point. I just wanted to compliment about that with people that actually don't like to tell what to do. Well, no one's perfect. If we don't want to listen, you're not going to grow, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you need to be open-minded, and you need also to accept other people's opinions for you to make a better version of yourself. That's my goal. So please continue. Sorry.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is, the way that I usually do it is I go and I read the data and I go and see who are the successful people and what are they doing, right? How are they sleeping? How are they eating? How are they exercising? I call those the sex habits: the sleep, eat, exercise. How are they
Sure.
doing it, right? And there's a lot of stuff out there: vegan, paleo, keto, high protein, blah, 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 5 meals a day, 2 meals a day, whatever, right? So look at the data, look at what kind of life they're trying to create for themselves. What are the things they're doing? Are they getting up at 4 a.m. and meditating? Are they having the ice bath? Are they working out? Gather the data and then commit to something, right? Cues. Okay, I'm going to try getting up before sunrise. I'm going to try exercising every morning when I wake up. I'm going to try meditating. And then commit to that for a minimum of a month, if not 3, and then gather the data. And when I say gather the data, I gather both of it. I encourage my clients and myself to gather both the data, right? The qualitative and the quantitative. What are the numbers, right? Is my sleep better when I go to bed at 10? Do I have more energy when I eat more protein? But also, how do I feel, right? And part of that is that kind of internal looking in, right? We are enculturated to ignore the inner messaging, right? Go to the bathroom at the break, not when you need to pee, right? Eat at 12 o'clock when the bell rings at school, right? Not
Right.
when I feel hungry. So I encourage people to look at what's working for other people, commit to it, try it out, and then reiterate, try, experiment, right? To live your life in an experimental way with the lens that where you are in life, it might change, right? So I'm 48, which means I'm in perimenopause. What I eat now as a 48 was different from what I ate 15 years ago, right? When I had young children at home who couldn't get up on their own, my morning routine was different than now when they're, not living at home and they're in college, right? So being aware of that and being willing to play with it, that's one thing. The second thing that I think is huge is our brains are brilliantly designed to create automation, right?
Right.
We make 35,000 decisions a day. Our brain goes, oh, you've done that 5 times in the same way. I'm going to create a habit path, a loop, so I don't have to use my prefrontal cortex to plan it and think about it. The problem is it then becomes boring because it's automatic and habitual. And we start thinking, why am I eating green food and smoothies for protein? Why am I going to bed at 10? Wouldn't it be much more fun to stay up until 2 in the morning, drinking,
Yeah. Tell me about it.
Right.
So I mean, just to go through, a couple of points that you just mentioned. I think it's important to have a routine, of course. Some routines, of course, it depends on your environment, as you just mentioned, and what is the actual real routine in reality from each person. But there's so many, so much information, for example, regarding diets. There's hundreds of people talking that this is good, this is good, this is good. So I think it's a matter of trying to be more precise for people to understand exactly which is the proper routine, because there's so much information which can become diverse. So people in the end say, okay, so what do I do? Because this person tells me to do this, and this other person tells me to do this other that. So what is the common sense in between? I have a motto saying not 8 or 80. I mean, you have to have something on middle, right? So yeah. So what do you think about that?
So what I say to people is 2 things. One is go to the sources that are scientific and grounded in actual reality. So, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram Reels, that's not the place you should be getting diet advice. You might get an idea there, but then you want to go to, the medical data, the doctors, the people who are in the industries that know the stuff, right? So, for example, for me, when I decided to change my diet, I went to a doctor who connected me with a health coach who was a nurse who took blood work, who looked at my hormone levels, who looked at my gut and inflammation. So she gathered scientific data about what was going on in my systems. Based on that, she then gave me advice, which I then followed and took note of, right? So for me, it's go to the .gov site, right? Not necessarily TikTok. The second is back to that sort of that inner listening, right? Sometimes you listen to somebody and you think they're just telling me this because they're trying to sell something to me,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
This is not grounded in reality. Or why would I buy a supplement that a 22-year-old man is going to consume that I, as a 48-year-old woman,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
how do I?
Yeah.
So it's like
I mean, in the end, I think people also need to feel the common sense. I mean, when it's a common sense conversation, when you can feel it, when is someone approach you to try to sell something, you also see how it goes the conversation.
yeah,
So again, William J. Matthews Jr. saying, curious, commit to a month, if not three. It's a range that I haven't necessarily heard. We often say 27 to 30 days. Possible to share more on this?
yes. So there's a lot of data on 21 days to make a new habit, 30 days to make a new habit. Some of the scientific data that supports up the minimum of a month is that this really fun study that NASA did. And when they were looking at how astronauts' brains and nervous systems and physical systems were navigating the disorientation, and they put goggles on them that flipped the world upside down. And what they found is that it took between 26 and 30 days, so same range that William just said, for their brains to flip the world the right way up. So they thought, is it just that you need 30 days total, or does it have to be consecutive? They repeated the experiment, split the group in half. Half the group at 15 days, they took the goggles off, and they found that they went back to baseline. So first thing is you do need about a month. Second thing is that what I've found coaching people on habits for over a decade is that we don't operate in a vacuum, right? So,
Right.
we have what's going on in the political world. We have our children, we have our clients, we have our power, the physical. There are so many things that impact how we commit to our habits. And one of the things that a lot of people struggle with is they don't do the work that I call like the kind of obstacle thinking beforehand. So you think, I want to commit to exercising every morning before I go to work. If you don't give yourself a little bit of time and think, okay, what time do I actually need to get up? Do I need to put that on my calendar? Do I need to have a conversation with my partner, my co-parent, about who's going to take the dog for a walk, who's going to get the kids up, who's going to make packed lunches? Do I need to have a conversation with my boss, my employer, my employees, my team about the
Sure.
fact that I'm going to be, right? And so do I have the workout clothes, right? Have I thought about the weather, right? Whatever it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't do that pre-thinking and think about all of the people around you. Or, you've all seen those people who, when you say, I'm quitting sugar or I'm doing dry January, who are like, have the candy bar, have the cocktail, have the candy bar, have the cocktail, right? And you've got
Yeah.
those people like, no, I'm committed, right? So that's one of the reasons why I say to people, give yourself a slightly bigger window so that you can really work through all of those other pieces that can, knock you off track.
Outstanding. Outstanding. So I hope that the answer was done. So yeah, you didn't reply yet. So I mean, you obviously had a lot of experience, of course, as you mentioned, good and bad. How was your feeling regarding the most insightful experience that you had? If you could share that.
Sure. So, some of the biggest traumatic experiences I've had in my life have been things that have happened to people that I love. And when traumatic experiences happen to people that you love,
Yeah.
you want to help, you want to control, you want to do everything you can in your power to make them feel better, to make their experience better. And that for me has been one of the most profound journeys. Is number one is recognizing that I can't. All I can do is control my internal response, right? The Viktor Frankl quote, right? My freedom lies in the gap between the stimulus and the response, right? The second is time. Time healing. Time is so healing. The third is really getting good at being able to ask people what they need so that I'm not trying to swoop in and do something, right? So a framework that I often use with my friends and help my clients with is what I call the 3 H's. hug, helped, heard, right? Somebody comes to you and they go, oh, this awful thing's happened.
Yeah.
You can say to them, do you just need a hug, right? Do you just need somebody to say, I am so sorry, let me hug you, right? I'm not going to try and fix it. I'm not going to try and help you. I just want you to know that I see you, I feel you, you're safe. The second, heard. Do you just need to say this out loud so it's not stuck in your head, stuck in your body? And I'm not going to fix it. I'm just going to listen, and I'm going to give you my full 100% attention, which in this day and age is a huge gift, right? Complete attention, because you're sitting there and you're like, oh yeah, you're telling me you've got something, you're on your phone. Like, that's not right. Full 100%. I hear you. And the third is help. Do you want me to buy your groceries because you've got to spend the next 3 weeks at the hospital? Do you want me to take your kids to school? Do you want me to respond to your emails, right? Can I give you some strategies? Can I give you help, right? So when you empower people to choose how they want your support, that also creates an energy of you not sort of swooping in. And so those have been some of the biggest lessons I've learned.
Absolutely. So William said, love it, and I agree. And he says, Janaza's story is fascinating. Thank you. I don't really know what he's mentioning. Is something that or is it part of the story? No. Okay. So I just wanted to compliment a bit on one of the points that you just mentioned. It's important to be heard, but there's also people with difficulty in communication, and usually they isolate themselves. What recommendation would you give, with people with that type of character, let's just say?
You mean somebody who isolates themselves when they're in trouble?
No, I mean, naturally, there are people that are very social, even, doesn't matter what is, the experience or the situation, but there are people who just, they lack of communication. It's just part of the character. So what would help to people to communicate better and express themselves?
Practice, right? You just got to, the thing about communication is you just got to get out there and do it. And one of the things that I talk about a lot, so I'm giving a talk for the $1 Million Roundtable annual meeting in Miami in June. I'm going to be talking in Chicago at Creative Con in a few weeks. A lot of what I say to people, particularly in this amazing world we live now with AI and all of the extraordinary tech tools that we have, is the inner game, right? You've got to commit to looking within, meditation, mindfulness, journaling, therapy, understanding your inner world. You then have to be willing to go out in the world and experiment. What happens when I let go of that argument, ground into my feet, embody my own space before I walk into that meeting, onto that stage, into that date, right? And then step back and reflect on it. So I see it as this sort of spiral process. I look within, I go out, I communicate, I talk, I try. What happens when I smile, when I talk? What happens when I don't? Is there alignment between my eyes might be smiling, but my eyes are not? My tone might, right? All of those things. Yeah. Is there alignment there? Practice.
I think the perception of when a person naturally smiles or when he's forced, I think it's very important, because the other person obviously can perceive when it's real and it's not. And of course, unfortunately, in society, there are people out there. We have a lot of masks. From my opinion, I think people should rethink the way they are in society. Would you like to have an opinion about that?
So I think there's a huge part that culture plays, right? So that's one of the reasons that I like to travel a lot, right? So in America, you tip for everything, right? In Japan, it's considered offensive to tip because the assumption is that you're implying that they don't earn enough, right? When you hand money over in Japan, you use two hands to show that the other hand isn't behind your back with a knife, right?
Yeah.
Right. so that one of the reasons that I love to travel is to see the different ways that cultures engage. Like I've spent a lot of time in Brazil, and I
Right.
love when I go to a hair salon with my friend, he can take her 8-month-old baby to the hair salon and hand her baby to the receptionist, to a grandma who's sitting there with her hair in cut. In America, in London, I would never have taken my baby to a hairdresser, right? So
Right. Yeah.
how do we engage with each other in society, and what do we take away from that? So, one of the things that's really important to me about all of this is that I don't just read about it, but that I live it and I feel it, right?
Outstanding. I mean, from this journey, I mean, you also do yoga. Can you tell us a bit about that? Exactly what you do?
So I taught yoga for about 15 years. I'm not currently teaching, I'm just practicing, which is
Okay.
fun to be on the other side of the on the other side of it. One of the things that teaching yoga taught me a lot about was communication, right? Because I would walk into a room and it taught me how to create a container, which I do with my coaching clients and which I do when I'm on stage, whether it's a virtual or a real life stage, is create a sense of we are now in this space together, and that's
Right.
different from the outside world, right? So you shut the door, you breathe together, you do some kind of ritual to bring people into the space. The other thing is what people make sense of your words, right? So some people, you might, if you want people to scoop their lower belly, you might say pull your belly button to your spine. Some people in the room, you look around and go, well, that made sense. Somebody else, you might need to say, lift your pubic bone to your belly button. And they do.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
people, you might need to say, engage your core, right? As teaching yoga for me has been really about learning to communicate and helping people feel in their body a concept that they can then take into their lives, right? So an example might be not too tight, not too loose. What does it
Right.
feel like to hold that in your arm, in your thighs, right? And then when I get off the mat, how do I go into a situation and think, I know how I'd like this to go, right?
Yeah.
But I can hold on to this not too tight, not too loose. And that gives me that kind of, I've experienced that, I've explored it in my physical being first.
What was the most insightful experiences that you had when you had yoga? I mean, from the most positive one I'm mentioning.
Um, so a few things for me was when I was a student, because the way that I have always lived all aspects of my life is that when I am a teacher, I'm also a student, right? So I am a coach, but I have 4 coaches, right? I am a speaker, but I'm always going to listen to other people speak and see how they're doing, what technology they're using, how they're using their body, how they're using the stage, right? So one of the pieces that was fascinating for me was one of my most beloved yoga teachers who was so in tune with whether my mind was in my body, right? So I would be in a pose and she would look at me and go, Tamsin, press into your right big toe, right? And she could see that my mind had left my body and I was thinking, oh, when I go to the grocery store later, I mustn't forget to get eggs because I promised to make cookies for my kids, parent teacher me, right?
Sure. Sure.
She could
Yeah.
see in my body that I wasn't there, right?
Nice. Nice. So, Tasmin, tell us a bit about, what are your next steps? I mean, how do you see yourself within the next 5, 10 years? As in goal, of course. I mean, we cannot predict everything, but what are your expectations and in your goals?
So the couple of really fun things is that I am launching a community called Alchemy for successful, mission-driven, lifelong learner, founder, entrepreneurs who want to understand how to connect their optimal habit expression to their big, juicy life and business vision so that they can live with fun, with joy, with impact. And what's really important to me is that this space is something that they co-create with me, right? As somebody with an academic background, it's really easy for me to go, this is what you need, right? And what I'm doing with Alchemy is having conversations with people. So reach out to me if you think that you fit in this community, because I would love to know what would make this place juicy for you, right? Is it a forum for you to explore your new concept? Is it a forum for you to learn more mindfulness tools? Is it networking, right? So I want to make this a co-created space. The second thing I'm doing, which I'm really excited about, is I'm launching a podcast. April 1st, because I love having juicy conversations with interesting people.
Sure.
And that's called Habit Planet, and that's going to be launching April 1st. So that's really exciting and fun. And then more speaking, because I love speaking, but not just the sage on the stage. I like to be the guide on the side. I like to create situations where I choreograph intimacy and connection and self-trust and vulnerability between people, because I think one of the things that the last 20 years, particularly the last 8 in this country, in the US where I live, there's such division and polarization. And I think that if we can connect with people one-on-one,
Yeah.
really understand each other and listen deeply, right? In that kind of,
I like to add something, I mean, because we're talking about a subject that involves already, geopolitics, media, diverse systems and platforms that deviate the mindset of people, sometimes even in a course of manipulation that people are not aware of. So I think this is a very serious subject that I never, overwhelm in saying it, that government's supposed to change the way they are doing things. Because, I mean, I do believe in freedom of speech. I do believe that people should have their own thoughts and not be implemented thoughts through their engaging on media and further, etc. So, from my perspective, I think that bipolarity, let's just say, it comes also from diverse environments, and especially depending on country, because some countries are more regulated, some countries are more open, especially in US. In media, it's out of proportion sometimes. What is your opinion regarding, the changes that current society is supposed to have?
well, I think part of it, the thing that I think is most important is the ability to evaluate information. So, what is the source of this information, right? Particularly with AI, what is the source of this information? Where is this information coming from, right? And then the ability to evaluate and kind of connect different ideas together. I think that, education needs to shift away from, you are the empty bucket. Let me
Right.
give you the information, because we can immediately at the tips of our fingers find who was, when did King Henry VIII reign? What's the 47th chemical on the periodic table, right? What was this executive order number and how did it state, right? What we want to do is look at it and step back and go, in this period, this was explained in this way, and that's what this means. This person is Christian and grew up in this country, and so when they explain this concept of abortion, they might have a particular lens, and I can pass those out and evaluate that. So for me, I think one of the most important things we can do is evaluate where our information is coming from, connect the information in a way that makes sense, but also back to that thing of listening deep within, right? Like, does this sit with me? How do I feel? Right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
what's the alignment, right?
Yeah, I mean, most of the times our gut feeling is actually our answer. Sometimes we actually, when we engage in certain situations, the gut feeling actually triggers. We just don't understand exactly why at that specific moment, but it tells us something. And I
Yeah.
think people should actually, hear from that, because if you feel something, it's not, something not right,
Yeah.
So And that's, I think, people in these days, especially because of current routines, because I know people personally that work 14, 16 hours a day. So when you talk to them, it feels like it goes from one ear and gets out from the other, because their mind is so overwhelmed about how many subjects they have during the day. They don't even feel anything. I mean, they feel, but they don't resonate with
Mm,
actually they're feeling, because they're thinking too many things.
mm,
I mean, from my personal experience, I've been through that also. And from my opinion, I mean, it's always, better to do a pause. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You need to start separating the subjects. And when you're talking to someone, leave everything and pay attention to the person to have
mm.
a proper conversation.
Yeah.
And I think this is a fact that I see anywhere with my experience. That you talk to people and they're doing something, they just said, yeah, 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 yeah. But they don't actually even, heard anything that you actually told them. So what would be your advice, for people to have better concentration, let's just say from subject to subject?
So meditation for me has been a game changer. And one of the reasons is that meditation cultivates concentration. So I became a Buddhist 12 years ago. And one of
Okay.
the reasons I became a Buddhist was this idea of looking within, studying the self, studying your own reactions, mental habits, going out in the world, going, this person has this habit, this person talks to me in this way, when I behave in this way, and then look back within. So the thing about meditation is it does two things. One is it cultivates concentration and working with the gap between stimulus and response, right? We live in a very dopamine driven world, right? All of us, we're always trying to get that next fix. And when you meditate, my teacher called it making friends with yourself, right? You sit there, you breathe, thoughts pop into your mind, and instead of reacting to the thought, picking up the phone, going and taking the laundry out the dryer because it beeped, going and acknowledging your dog, your kid, the email, whatever, you just sit with it. And you sit with that reactivity and come back into that moment. The second thing that meditation is really good at is you can study or focus or dig into one particular thing. So, one of the forms of meditation that I find to be very powerful is called loving kindness. And what we do is we draw to mind somebody we love, we draw to mind somebody who is neutral, maybe somebody who served us coffee, and we draw to mind somebody who we dislike or maybe even hate. And we visualize each of these people one at a time. And as we look at them, we say, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be safe, may you feel at ease. And what that does is it changes your own internal relationship with this person. So that when you're interacting with them, there's less emotional valence. You can be more present, more
Yeah.
calm. The other thing about that I love is it makes you realize your own kind of ego part of it, right? Somebody who is neutral today might be somebody you love in 6 months. Somebody who you love today might be somebody you hate in 6 months, right? And so it highlights the way that we all get very stuck in our own egoic construction, right? With reference to other. So meditate, meditate, meditate. And I love that meditation is called a practice, right? It's never perfect. Every day you sit your ass down on your cushion and you commit.
Absolutely. About ego, I think for some people it's hard to explain, because they just have too much of it, and it's kind of hard to make it come down. I mean, sometimes you can, sometimes you don't. But in the end, my personal advice that I give to general people is, you don't need to prove nothing to anyone. You don't need to show your ego just to try to show yourself that you're better than someone. You should be even, and you should always be at the same level communicating with anyone, because it's so good perspective. No one's perfect. No one knows everything.
Mhm.
And you need general knowledge from people and sharing ideas and do what we call brainstorming most of the times,
Mhm.
to evaluate yourself and have a better version of yourself. I mean, um, common days people forget about one major thing is how to evaluate yourself. I mean, how do you see yourself? How do you feel? And how do you think that you're going to become, a better version of yourself? But you don't do that, and most people don't even realize, and they just do the easy part, which is no, it's the other part fault. It's no, it's that part fault. No, no, it's not. It's not. In the end, it's you also, because you also have a part in it. You know, but that I think is the most of the perspective of people. I mean, what is your opinion regarding that?
So a couple of things. One is, I'm a big fan of doing the kind of work I just described, and also
Yeah,
seeking out, all the different kinds of, therapy, talk therapy and all of those, maybe psychiatric medication. Um, because when we get to a point, either through trauma, personal
yeah,
trauma, or sort of cultural trauma, historic trauma, it can be hard sometimes to function. And one of the descriptions one of my meditation teachers, one of my Buddhist teachers gave me was that if we are in a situation where we are so angry at somebody that it's impacting our ability to function, that's when it becomes problematic, right? So it's buying the poison and drinking it ourselves, right? Like we're so angry, but the poison is rotting us from the inside out.
yeah, yeah,
We want to be poisoning the other person, but we're not, right? So that piece I think is really, really important. It's to notice your ability to impact, is to be able to show up and have the kind of impact you want, and whether you are not able to do that because you are so impacted by those sorts of traumas, right? So part of it I think is really taking personal responsibility, right? And are you willing to look at yourself and say, I want to be this kind of person and I can't because I'm stuck
yeah,
on this interaction, this situation. And one of the things that I like to talk about is, there's a lot of stuff out there in the world about manifesting, right? And I know a lot of people are like, oh, that's so woo. If you look at it from a neuroscience perspective, what you're actually doing is you are creating neural pathways. And there's a lot of really impactful scientific data that shows that, Olympians, pianists, musicians, when you practice something in your brain, even if you're not using your hands, even if you're not using your body, the neurons in your brain fire, right? You can literally sit there and imagine yourself lifting a weight and your bicep will grow. Your
yeah,
bicep will literally grow by you just imagining that you were doing that, right? So what we know is that if you really want to create a life for yourself, you really want to create a particular kind of relationship, particular kind of body, a particular kind of job, particular kind of money, a home, etc. Starting here is a
yeah.
really good thing to do because you're laying all of those neural pathways so that the thing comes to fruition.
I think you just mentioned perseverance. So it's a fact that people need to have perseverance to achieve their goals. And as I mentioned in many previous conversations, it's important to commit. It's not about having that first action or try to move forward, but if you don't commit the idea or whatever you want to do, it never realizes. So it's
Yeah.
important not to be afraid
Yeah.
of getting there. It doesn't matter if it fails first time. Well, we continue, and that's the thing. I mean, nothing is perfect. So,
Exactly.
what is your perspective regarding that, and to advise people who are afraid to commit with their goals?
So I think one of the things that's really interesting there, and that's why, people like me, coaches, are so important, is that we often get stuck, right? So, the way that I coach people is there are three kind of key pillars. The first is the big juicy why. Why you want to live a particular way? What is important to you? What are your values? What are you trying to create? What are you trying to build? What kind of world do you
Yeah.
want to be part of in a small way and in a big way, right? So identifying that, people talk about it as dharma, as purpose, as their big why, right? So that's the first bit. I call it the telescope, right? Like, let me look into the future. What am I creating? Then you have to step back and go, what are the daily habits that I need to make that happen, right? And so I have a couple of digital programs that get into that. Like, I call one the habit audit for a juicy life, where it's like, okay, like, how do I, like, what am I actually doing on a day-to-day basis, right? And is that connecting to what I say I think I want to build?
Sure.
And then we need mindset. We need to work with the mental habits, right? We need to think about who we're spending time with, what our boundaries are, who we are engaging with, what we're eating, how we are allowing the outside world to impact our ability to function, right? Because if we don't connect those, we don't stay on track. And so when people fall off track, what I'll often get them to do is to stop. And
Yeah.
is it because it's just become really freaking boring, right? Do you just need to restructure the habit, or do you need to remind yourself what you're trying to create? And for me, I start every morning by meditating and reading my big vision. I read my big vision to myself every morning with my first cup of coffee to remind myself, this is what I care about. This is what I'm wanting to build. These are the kinds of relationships I want. This is the kind of business I want. This is the kind of home I want, right?
Yeah, yeah, I totally resonate with you, and I think it's something that people, supposed to really rethink, the way they think, in these days, because if you want to achieve goals, you need to think, what am I doing wrong? That's the first thing, and most people just think, well, it didn't went the way I wanted it. I didn't plan it like that. Well, you can plan 1,000 times the way you want, you'll never go your way the first time or the second. Sometimes it takes 10 times or 20 times, and that's the reality.
Yeah.
But my advice always is never give up, and don't be stubborn. That's the other side, because I go with the theory of Einstein. Don't try to repeat what you just done expecting a different result. You need to change the strategy. It's important. So that also happens. I also had many talks with people that are continuously doing the same, and I said, but it doesn't get there. Well, exactly. You already tried it. It doesn't work. Take it as experience. Do something different to try to achieve that. And it takes experiments. You need to experiment yourself.
Totally.
I've been doing. And even myself, I've been doing 26 years doing experiments with myself. People said, "Is that healthy?" Well, I can tell you, it's all experience. If I didn't do it, I wouldn't know how you feel. I wouldn't know how was it, and I wouldn't know how to tell you how is the experiment or is all the experience I had in myself. So, what would you say about yourself? That when you do experiments, on yourself, how do you feel, and what is your most common insight regarding that?
So I think one of the big things about experimenting is you have to be comfortable with, I think, a couple of things. One is you have to be comfortable with failing,
Yeah,
right? Because when we experiment, it's not always going to work. And I think, again, we don't do a great job in our society of cultivating comfort with failure,
yeah,
because we conflate the failure with who we are as a human, right? So instead
yeah,
of me saying I failed, it's I am a failure, right? And when we get stuck in that kind of mindset, that kind of self-talk, it is harder then to get back up and do it again. So part of it is you have to be, and we know that, like, if you're not succeeding, you're not failing enough, right? Like that's sort of the ultimate thing, right? The second is the sort of vulnerability around exposing yourself, right? And so, the way that I do it is I will, make little bids in certain sort of social situations, for example, and I will reveal something personal about myself and see if I say to somebody, I'm in perimenopause, I find myself, my sleep is dysregulated, or I found myself more anxious, right, than before. If people kind of go, oh, let's order some coffee, and they kind of shut it down, I'm like, okay, like this person or this group, this is not a space where I can really own my own personal experience of being a woman, right, of a certain age, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that for me is, or if I'm hanging out with other parents, right? There's a lot of sort of cultural energy around all of parenting is wonderful. For me, I loved being pregnant. I loved breastfeeding. The point of parenting that I found the hardest was kind of 1.5 to 3, when they were mobile but irrational. And you couldn't kind of have a logical conversation with them about climbing on furniture and running across roads, right? And then running all in different directions, right? Other people love that. And being in a space where I can say, that for me was stressful. That doesn't mean that I don't love my kids, that they're not, people that I adore in the world and that I would do anything for. But I found that bit of parenting really hard. If I say that and people go, oh, yes, I found this, right? And that draws you in, that sense of, I'm willing to acknowledge what I found hard. So that for me, so those are the two pieces: the comfort with failure and the comfort with getting vulnerable and messy about who you are and your personal experience in this world.
Yeah. So just to complement that, I'd like to say that society usually has prejudgment, and that's very bad. I mean, you should never judge no one because you don't like to be prejudged either, right? Just think about that. So that's the advice also, to complement that insight to people, because this happens, when something goes bad. I've been through this hundreds of times. When something goes bad, it's always someone's fault. Everyone prejudge anyone, but no one actually thinks in what is supposed to be done. If there's a problem, don't point the finger. Just focus on the solution instead of whose fault is it. You cannot control that. Most of the times it's not even a human failure. It's because there's something happened that is out of your control. You just need to figure out the resolution. And in society, people take it as, oh no, that guy is very bad. He's a failure. He does that. He does this. Prejudging does not help. And I think that's a setback between understanding how to fulfill, the perspective in life and journey for future, and people don't think about that. What advice would you give to people that actually has this, prejudging thoughts, about people?
So a couple of things is that meditation I suggested of,
Yeah.
focusing on somebody you love, somebody who's neutral, somebody who you hate. Another thing that is really helpful is to see your life and your experiences in a more kind of playful way, with more curiosity, right? And I often think about like watching like the dogs play in my local park here in Brooklyn, or watching kids interact in a sand pit, and they pick up water and they tip it, and they, what happens if I turn it upside down, right? And I
Yeah.
sometimes think, I wish that we held on to that energy of like, let me try. Oh, well, that didn't work. That doesn't mean that I'm bad or you're bad, right? It's just like we're all just playing. And I think life can seem incredibly stressful and important, and yes, there
Yeah.
is. But if we can take that lens of like, let's just be curious, let's play, let's just give it a shot and see what happens, and not take the outcome so seriously. And so one of the ways that I bring that into my personal life is that I learn new hobbies. I started learning the electric guitar a couple of years ago, because I was like, okay, being a beginner again, it sucks. It's really difficult. I'm going to feel like a failure. Like I'm going to have to struggle with that feeling, being like, oh no, I'm not a failure. I'm just not very good at playing the guitar yet. Right? Yet. Right? Or taking an art class. My boyfriend and I are going to go and learn how to do Thai cooking tomorrow, right? Like I don't know how to do any Thai cooking. I'm sure I'm going to mess it up, But part of it is me being comfortable with stepping into a space where I don't know the rules. Like one of the reasons I travel, right? Well, I don't know what, and I'm just going to give it a shot and see what happens, and be
Committed,
gentle with
right? You
myself.
need to commit to
Yeah,
find out, and achieve, that perspective. I mean,
yeah,
like we just talked, if you don't commit to try to go somewhere, you never know how is it. You never gonna feel the experience. How was it to get there?
yeah,
So you want to have the insight or that perspective to actually get there and achieve it, right?
yeah.
So that's been amazing. It's been 55 minutes already. And, I mean, it was really, really insightful conversation. I think it's very enjoyable, and for definite people learned it from it a lot. So just to a couple of points before we finish. In general, what advice, finding, this final thought, what advice would you give to society in general in be able to improve themselves, for a better version of themselves?
I think the first would be pause before you open your mouth.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? My
yeah,
mom used to say when I was a kid, count to 10, right? So take a breath, you know. The second would be to go in. I have lots of tattoos. One of my tattoos says expect to be delighted, and it's in my dad's handwriting. I love my dad. And a lot of people will tell you have no expectations, but I think a lot of times the world can seem dark and sad and confusing, and you think people are out to get you. And the sense of when we go into a space, what we're really thinking and feeling is, can I really be myself?
yeah.
Is it safe to be me? So for me, when I step into a place where I don't know anybody and I don't know the rules, I step in with the energy of I'm going to expect to be delighted, right? So and then just have some fun and joy, right? Like, is there a way, And and this is not, I'm not a Pollyanna. One of my children's had cancers. I've had some really shitty stuff in my life, to pardon
Yeah,
my,
yeah, yeah.
but it's about a perspective. And I go, okay, what can I learn from that about who I am and how I show up and how can I support other people? So expect to be delighted, go into situations with openness, expansiveness, and joy. And when somebody does something that feels really horrible, take a moment and think, maybe something bad happened to them. Rather than immediately categorizing, canceling them, take a
Yeah.
moment and think, maybe something bad happened. Let me give them the benefit of the doubt before I give up on them.
I wouldn't agree with you more. I think that's exactly the point. So before we finished, I always say to my guests to displace a power message. What would you be your power message of today?
Hmm. My power message: live your life as a joyful experiment, and step into the energy that be a sunflower, the heliotropic effect. Be the sunflower. Bring joy and energy and love to any situation you can, because we are contagious. Our behavior is contagious. Our attitudes are contagious. If we step into situations with joy and positive energy, that will ripple into the world.
Absolutely. So with that, I think was very insightful. Anything else you like to add, Tadman?
Please reach out to me and have more conversations. If you think you might be a fit
Yep.
for alchemy, if you want to interview me, get me on my stage, come and have a conversation with me. I love having interesting conversations with people.
Very nice. So I think that was about that. So Tadman, it was really a pleasure to have you here today. I really enjoyed the conversation, definitely, and I think many people will, and they'll learn from it. And for future even conversations with you, you never know. So that was all for today. Don't miss the next episode at 4 p.m. GMT. See you back then, and thank you all for watching. Thank you.